Anatoly Slivko, under the guise of a seemingly kind and altruistic community member, was a youth sports coach and a volunteer at a local aero club, where he would lure young boys with the promise of flight lessons and other perks. But behind the friendly smiles and seemingly harmless activities, Slivko had a dark obsession with hanging and strangling young boys to death. He would then film and document the killings in detail, often reenacting the murders for his own twisted pleasure. Let's delve into the lies behind those friendly smiles and uncover the disturbing truth about this heinous killer, whose depraved actions shocked the Soviet Union and still send shivers down the spines of true crime enthusiasts today. Anatoly Slivko was a Russian hemophilic, ephebophilic, and necrophilic serial rapist, and serial killer active in Novosibirsk, Russia. Over a 20-year period, Slivko convinced 43 teenage boys to let him hang them until they became unconscious so he could molest them, before reviving them himself. 7 victims died during the ordeal. Slivko was born on December 28, 1938, in Iserbash, an oil extracting station established just 6 years prior on the Caspian Sea coast. His homeland was gripped by Joseph Stalin's forced collectivization of agriculture and was under the horrific effects of war and poverty at the time of his birth. The first of 2 children, Slivko's father was an alcoholic who argued with his wife frequently, and he was a lonely child and did poorly in school, despite being very intelligent, and had numerous health problems. He also witnessed many horrors of the war during his youth, such as the sight of dead bodies and animals and hiding in a cemetery with other children to hide from bomb raids. He would go on to discover that he was homosexual and had erectile dysfunction in his teens and was greatly ashamed of these things. After finishing high school, Slivko tried and failed to get into Moscow University and then joined the Soviet Army. He was regularly belittled by his colleagues and was officially discharged after he was deemed incompatible with military life and health issues. He returned home in 1961 and his younger half-sister introduced him to his future wife Ludmila. The two rarely had sex due to Slivko's impotence, but still managed to have 2 children before ceasing sexual activity together entirely. Slivko was further humiliated by his impotence when a nurse laughed at him after he sought medical help for it. By all appearances, the Slivkos were good and respected people. In 1961, Slivko witnessed a traffic accident in which a drunk driver swerved into a group of pedestrians, fatally injuring a boy in his early teens who was wearing the uniform of the Young Pioneers, the Soviet equivalent to the Boy Scouts. For reasons that Slivko could not explain, he found himself greatly aroused by the sight of the dying boy and the smell of burning gasoline. This event triggered Slivko's later actions, incorporating the boy's outfit and a developed shoe fetish into his fantasies and crimes. At an undetermined point, he established a children's club from where he would draw his victims. This first club was destroyed in a fire and Slivko established a second and definitive one in 1966, called Churchid. In the ensuing years, Slivko gained local celebrity status due to his activities at the club and his amateur documentaries about German atrocities in World War II. Slivko targeted young teenage boys who were short for their age at his children's club. He never chose a victim who was 17 or older because he feared the greater physical strength of a late teenager. Once or twice a year, Slivko would form a close friendship with a chosen boy. After gaining his trust, he would propose him the experiment. When he accepted, he would purchase a Young Pioneer's uniform for him to wear, shine his shoes, and tell him not to eat for several hours before the experiment to prevent vomiting. Once unconscious, Slivko would strip the boys naked, caress and fondle them, arrange them in suggestive positions, and masturbate before reviving them. If the victim died, he would dismember and burn the body with gasoline, masturbate a second time, and bury the remains. Slivko would also extensively photograph and film the experiments, using the images and recordings to revive the experience and masturbate to them for months afterward, until he decided he needed to act again. He also filmed himself cutting his victims' shoes and kept them as trophies. Beginning in 1963, Slivko began to periodically persuade boys at his club to let him hang them as part of an experiment that would stretch their spine and, Slivko claimed, make them grow taller. The boys knew that the procedure would render them unconscious, but Slivko reassured them that he would revive them. Slivko would then use the opportunity to molest the boys and masturbate, before reviving them and cautioning them into silence. Most victims resumed their lives unaware of what Slivko had done to them, but in 7 cases Slivko was unable to revive the boys and he disposed of the bodies by dismembering and burning the remains with gasoline. All experiments were photographed and recorded extensively to serve as mementos for Slivko. When his first fatal victim, Alexei Dobryshev, died in 1964, Slivko destroyed the recordings, but he kept all the ones he made later. In November 1985, the prosecutor Tamara Langvieva, who was investigating the disappearance of Slivko's final victim, Sergei Pavlov, decided to take a look into Slivko and his club after she learned that Pavlov had told a neighbor that he was going to meet the leader of Churchid before he went missing. Langvieva found nothing illegal about how the club was run, but suspicions arose when several boys who had been to the club declared that they had suffered temporary amnesia after Slivko performed experiments on them. The next month, Slivko was arrested at his Stavropol home and formally charged with 7 counts of murder, sexual abuse and necrophilia. Between January and February 1986, he led investigators to the whereabouts of 6 bodies, but he could not find Dobryshev's. In June, he was sentenced to death and imprisoned at Novichokhovsk, where he would remain on death row for 3 years. On September 16, 1989, Slivko was interviewed by detectives investigating the murders of the then unidentified Rostov Ripper to gain some insight into his possible motives and methods. The information provided by Slivko was largely useless. Only a few hours later, Slivko was executed with a single shot to the back of his head when he was 50 years old.